right? It's such a pleasure being back here in Missouri. It's my first campaign stop here in Kansas City. I just did Joplin yesterday.
Woo!
Thank you. So for me, what's important about this campaign is connecting with people and sharing stories, because as you get to know people in their individual struggles, for me, that's what you take into the long-term campaign struggle that we're having together to represent the best interests of the public, the American people at large. And those stories often have connections for me in terms of my own personal life and struggles. You know, I can look back to a time when, as a member of the Jewish community, I found myself sitting on the other side of a table from a long, bearded, wizened rabbi who looked at me, but didn't really see me. As he said, you know, I've heard from other people in the community that you're gay. Is that true? If that's true, it's going to have to be investigated. And if that's true, there may be consequences. And in that moment, I look back on it and realize how very small and very, very tiny as a person I felt hearing that statement, hearing that diminishing statement. And I connect that with how small it felt all the many times in my life when I've applied for jobs, for instance, and then showed up in person and noticed the reaction in person, having seen my face, wasn't always the same as the reaction that I got beforehand. These stories are stories that connect to stories people are experiencing all over this country. Last night in Joplin, someone shared with me a story about her son and his experience dealing with hostility for being gay. In Muncie, Indiana, someone shared with me their story of a woman whose husband was taken by ICE just because of who and what he was. His status, his existence itself had been criminalized. There are so many people across this country that are made to feel small, less than human, insignificant, as if they do not matter, as if they're not entitled to the basic human dignity and rights that we all deserve, until or unless we address that. And we listen to those stories, and we make those stories and their struggle a part of our platform. Then people are not going to see us as the force that we need to be, fighting for them, standing with them, understanding them. For me, some of the things I advocate for, any number of the candidates might also agree with. Yes, we agree that we need to fight the democratic deficit, that unfortunately there's been a huge gap put in place between power over their existence, over the country that they live in. We know that we need ranked choice voting. We know that we need proportional representation. We know we need to end racist voter ID laws. And we know that we need to end corporate personhood and take corporate money out of politics. Because we know that is a part of what shuts out America's citizens from power, a major reason. But for our campaign, we want to take a bold approach, understanding that as human beings, we all share in common this sense of being part of a common struggle. And so where we support the Green New Deal, and we do as a campaign, we support 100% renewable energy, clean energy. We support the millions of green jobs that go along with that. We support the effort to save this planet, the essence of the Green New Deal. We also realize that that effort is not something that can or should be confined to our borders. And so as the Green Path Forward, our campaign's plan outlines, we must build better relationships with the rest of the world. We must say to the nations of the world that we see you, that we find common human cause with you, and we stand shoulder to shoulder with you as human beings. And we are going to save this planet together. We also believe that we must band together in that atmosphere of a greater sense of togetherness to save this planet from all of the environmental crises that we face, whether it is plastic pollution, with clear benchmarks on the part of our campaign for resolving that, or it is the issue of peak meat, the rapacious nature of agribusiness, and the raising of livestock in ways that is not only inhumane, but is contributing, science tells us, to this climate change catastrophe. Our campaign is very much focused on the many facets of environmental hazard created by the actions of mankind. We are also focused on workers' rights and a minimum wage, but we understand that you cannot put a figure, a specific figure, on the amount of wages that equates to the worth and the dignity of human beings. We are fighting for fair cost of living. We are fighting for wages that are tied to inflation and cost of living so that people can actually afford to live at a standard of living that befits all human beings' dignity. I live in California. We have tent cities all over the state. It is leading the country in homelessness. We must guarantee housing. We must guarantee health care, yes, but although my fellow candidates also carry the same guarantees, as someone who has represented the city of Youngstown and its South Side, I know that you can promise health care, but if you don't have clinics in many of the neighborhoods of the city, especially in communities of color, that shiny new health care card isn't going to help much. So we must engage in active community building and have community say-so and local control, whether it be health care or it be policing, so that we bring to an end police brutality and the murders, the genocidal murders happening to people of color on our streets. It must end, and we will empower communities to do so. We believe very strongly that the way to a fairer and a greener America is by listening to America, by seeing America for what it is, by making genuine human connections. And while not everyone will understand the idea of what eco-socialism means, control over the means and the distribution on the part of workers, or the means of distribution, and the idea of all of the dialectic on Marx, and all of that is important to understand and to know. I spent many years in college studying that. But you don't have to understand the fact that this country is broken fundamentally. Yeah. And the lack of fairness that we have in this country makes everyone feel small, unimportant, disconnected from each other, disconnected from power. And to me, my eco-socialism means that no one is small. No one is unimportant. Everyone belongs. Everyone has human dignity. Everyone is respected, and everyone shares. Everyone shares in the means of production, but also everyone shares in the means of benefit and improvement and progress. It is an effort we are engaged in together. And so, back to this idea of listening to people's stories. That's what I've been doing on this campaign trail. That's what I intend to continue doing over the course of this campaign, making those human connections with people. It's why I'm the only candidate here at this event, at other events, at many other opportunities to connect with common causes that aren't necessarily Green Party causes, but are human causes. Because that is how we are going to not only satisfy the needs of building a party, but how we are going to build a people-powered movement to put people over profit, to put the planet over profit. We are going to do that by breaking down the barriers that exist between human beings created for the profit of the few, and by listening to and connecting with and holding hands with the many. I thank you for your time. I thank you for doing all that you do for green activism and to help heal this planet. And I look forward to working with you all together to bring about healing, peace, and transformative change. We have 1 minute left. Anybody want to ask a quick question? Anyone?
Born and raised in California?
No, I was born and raised in New Jersey, and I came up out of the projects in Newark, New Jersey. Hard-working family. My father is what you call, our family is what you call working poor, something that really shouldn't exist in this country at all. And they struggled to get by, and the message that sent to me was that, put your head in a book, work hard, and I did. I got through Princeton, through law school, and then went back to be an educator, because what I also understood was the fact that my struggle existed means that other people are struggling, and that struggle shouldn't have to exist for anyone else in the future. So this is a part of that too, that sense of giving back. That's very important and meaningful to me. So I thank you for your question. We're definitely out of time now, I'm sure.
We are. Anybody else have a quick question?
Oh, great. I would love to take any more questions.
Dario, what are you seeing out there? You're out on the road a lot. We're in Kansas City here. Give us a vision, of the country right now. Where are we at? You are talking to a lot of people all over this country, and we'd love to get your vision of what's going on in this country and what the potential you see.
People have lost a sense of faith, a sense of hope. They see this country as definitely heading in the wrong direction, but more than that, many have just checked out. I think to just say that they see it as headed in the wrong direction, they'd like to turn around, I think that doesn't convey the sense of hopelessness and the apathy that goes along with that. And so the challenge that we face as green activists is giving people back that sense of investment and the possibility of change, because that has been sold out by the two corporate-controlled parties in this country. They've colluded together to ensure that people feel like they have no options. They've created that hopelessness, they've created that despair, and they profit off that hopelessness and despair. Whether it's in our failing school systems that just funnel children into prisons they can then use them for cheap labor in, or it's our healthcare system where people feel like it's almost criminal to be sick because they're saddled for the rest of their lives with crippling debt that imprisons them just because they happen to exist and breathe and need health care, like all human beings do. And many people feel that there's no breaking free of that. And so the message that we have to send to them is that, yes, of course you can break free of that, but we can only do that together. So join us. Join us as the only party that isn't co-opted by the corporate interests, because together we can overcome all of those barriers. Because when it really comes down to it, it's in our hands. As Americans, as humans, it's in our hands, the future of the planet and our destiny as a human race. So what we really have to focus on, the specifics of the academics of it all, is very important for many of our green leaders arguing over proposals on the National Committee list. I'm one of them. What people really want to hear is, are things going to be better? Can you tell me how it's going to get better? Because it doesn't look like it's going to get better for me, and I've been struggling for so long. Yep. Listen and respond with hopefulness. That's what lays before us.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
With my fellow candidates, this belief in eco-socialism, and that's a belief that requires a fundamental economic system change. We are talking about putting power in the hands of the workers. We are talking about investing in and creating workers' cooperatives. We are talking about workers' control in the economic sense of the system, rather than simply being subjects of a system that is corporately owned, a product of the hyper-capitalist system in which we live in. But some of the aspects of that require unpacking include, for instance, monetary policy. Our party has been great about putting forward a platform plank on greening the dollar. And it's not something that many of our candidates are talking about much, but needs to be talked about, because it has to be unpacked. Many Americans have certain illusions about our monetary system. The government just creates money, and that's where it comes from. And they're not quite clear on how banks control much of what happens economically in this country. And if that was discussed more, and our platform plank on greening the dollar, putting our money supply in democratic control, we could also open up the discussion of some of the platform planks that my campaign is putting forward under our People of Color Bill of Rights. This comprehensive platform, unlike any other campaign, that addresses the many gaps between the experience of people of color in this country and the rights on the books we're all supposed to hold equal. The banking and lending industry has been very discriminatory, and it has led to things like redlining. This is a serious economic and racial and social issue. The lines drawn in communities for certain ethnicities, certain races, many of which look the same that they were around the turn of the century in about 60 different metro areas across this country. Okay. Community Reinvestment Act of the 70s was supposed to ameliorate that situation, but obviously it hasn't worked and banks have gotten around it. So we need to strengthen the legislative framework to stop that. When we talk about economic policy, we have to talk about economic inequalities. And for me, being a socialist means believing that the debts of the excesses and abuses of capitalism must be repaid, including reparations. We talk about how we're going to differentiate ourselves from Sanders. Sanders got on the Breakfast Club radio show quite some months ago, a mostly black-oriented program to discuss issues of relevance to that community, and when asked directly, said he didn't support reparations. To me, that's not socialism. That's not socialism, because you have a whole segment of this country that has been cut out and shut out economically, as well as in terms of democratic force and power in this country, and that must be addressed and fixed. When I talk about the economy, I also have to talk about the military-industrial complex, and when we talk about the economy, we must include a discussion of reorienting our financial priorities away from war. And I don't, thank you. I don't just mean cutting, we're going to slash here, we're going to slash there. No. Okay? We're definitely going to reduce the amount of resources put into that basket, but that entire basket will be relabeled from war to the department, the new Department of Peace. And that will be the focus for that department, peace, not war, or what they call defense, which is usually just a softer sell word that they put on top of America's imperialist and colonialist military interventions abroad. It must stop. Close all of the bases abroad, 700 plus, end the warmongering across the planet, end the interventions like the interventions we had in Bolivia and in Venezuela, and years before that in Chile, and years before that in my father's country in Iran, when they got rid of democratic leadership there because it didn't suit their oil-centered, money-centered interests. We've been doing this as a country for a very long time, and it's time we stopped and ended the toxic presence this country's become on the international diplomatic scene. We could be a great force for good, folks, if our focus was on peace building. And what I mean by that is not what they call the State Department's diplomatic, air quotes, peace building. I mean building a sense of a global community that improves quality of life across the planet, that improves the economic experience of human beings across the planet. Often when politicians in a position like myself get up here and they speak, they have a closing that involves some kind of phrase such as, God bless America. Why just America? Our focus has to be the world because there are human beings all across it. And if we're uplifting ourselves economically, all human beings must experience that upliftment. So, to address the second question about the combining of tickets, I have an excellent VP choice that our campaign has chosen already, and her name is Darlene Elias. She's a former chair of the National Green Party. She's a chair of the Massachusetts Party, former co-chair of the Latinx Caucus, has been engaged as an activist in issues of housing rights in her town of Holyoke, Massachusetts, and is very well known for that, and is a very vocal, very well-spoken, and very motivated activist for community building. Her roots and her education go back to social work. And I think this country as a whole needs a social worker in chief for all of the things this country's been through and is putting each other through. We could use a social worker in chief. And I'm humbled by her presence on the ticket and her activism in women's rights and for communities that are otherwise voiceless. And I think that our pairing not only looks like America, it speaks to the American experience. Because as, to paraphrase a revolutionary statement, there is no revolution without women. And together the two of us make not just a presidential candidate plus one, we're a team, we're a partnership. A team and a partnership for a newer sense of American inclusion and diversity that is long overdue. So, God bless the human race, and God bless this planet that we're saving together.